Week 15 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few defense DST units I would start this week. The first one, the Minnesota Vikings. So the Vikings here, I know they're not a great unit this week season on defense, but this week a great matchup versus the Indianapolis Colts. I give up the most fantasy points to defenses on the season. So the last few weeks here for Minnesota, Week 12 versus New England, 26 points allowed, 3 sacks, a return touchdown. Week 13 versus Jets, 22 points allowed, a sack to win those. And then Week 14 in a tough loss at Detroit, 34 points allowed. But this week here versus Indianapolis, we know their offense has been challenged all season here in Indianapolis. And their offensive line, one of the worst offensive lines in all pro football. Matt Ryan's been a turnover machine. And I think Minnesota at home here with the good matchup and all those factors against Matt Ryan in this offense could have a good ball game. And I have them as a start this week. The next defense I look to start is the New Orleans Saints. So the Saints here have been an up-and-down defense this season for the most part. But I think this week, in a good matchup, they could have another good ball game as this New Orleans team versus Desmond Ridder, the rookie for the Atlanta Falcons. And we know this Falcon offense has been pretty bad the whole season. So the last few games here for New Orleans, Week 11 versus the Rams, 20 points allowed, 4 sacks. Week 12 at San Francisco, 13 points allowed, a sack. Week 13 at Tampa, 17 points allowed, a sack and a fumble recovery. So right now, the last 3 weeks, for the most part, they're keeping the points under 20 points per game scored against this New Orleans defense. Now coming off a bye, being refreshed, back home indoors, I think the Saints defense could cause some damage in this ball game. And they're definitely a start this week. The next defense is the New England Patriots. So the Patriots, for the most part, they've been a solid unit. I know weeks 12 and 13 versus pretty good offenses, they haven't done much. But versus the weak offenses to mediocre offenses, they've gone out there and put up some big ball games. So the last few weeks here for this Patriot defense, Week 12 at Minnesota, 33 points allowed, a sack and an into. Week 13 versus Buffalo, 24 points allowed, 2 sacks, a fumble recovery. And then Week 14 at Arizona, they went off with a big game, 13 points allowed, 6 sacks in that one. Matthew Judon was everywhere, fumble recovery for a touchdown and an interception. So right here, Week 15, on paper, it don't look like a great matchup. I think they could get Derek Carr and this Raider team to have a tough time in this one. And Derek Carr, we saw last week, he didn't do anything pretty much in that ball game, finishing with 5 fantasy points. So right here, this New England defense is hungry. They know they got to win ball games by running the football and playing good defense. And this week here in another indoor game after we just saw them in Arizona, I think they have another good one in this one is the Patriot defense. And they'll must start this week at defense. The next defense is the Kansas City Chiefs. So the Chiefs here as a defensive unit, as long as they got a good matchup, their team you can roll out there with confidence this season. Week 12 versus the Rams in a great matchup, 10 points allowed, 3 sacks, 2 win those. Week 13 in a tough one at Cincy, 27 points allowed at the sack. And Week 14 at Denver in that game, 28 points allowed, but they had the 6 sacks, the 2 interceptions, and a pick 6 in that one. So right here, Week 15, a great matchup at the Texans that give up the 3rd most fantasy points to defenses on the season. So I'll give Texans credit where credit is due. Last week, they took the Cowboys to the brink. They were up to the very last drive in that one was this Houston Texan team. But this week here, his Kansas City team is a different type of team than the Dallas Cowboys. Even though I know they're both similar in record, the Chiefs are going to come out, get a lead early and often, and they're going to make this Texan offense one-dimensional, where they're going to have Davis Mills or Jeff Driscoll, whoever's going to rotate in and out for this offense here, try to beat them. And that's where this Chief defensive line and Chris Jones is going to get to the quarterback. And that's where the secondary is going to start making plays. So I like them as a start this week. And the 5th and final defense I like as a start is the Green Bay Packers. So the Packers here, their defense hasn't been great over the last few weeks here, except Week 13 in Chicago. They put in a serviceable performance. So the last few weeks, Week 10 versus Dallas, 28 points allowed, 2 sacks, 2 intos. Week 11 versus the Titans, 27 points allowed, 3 sacks, and into. Week 12 at Philly, 40 points allowed, 2 sacks, a fumble recovery. And then Week 13 at Chicago, 19 points allowed, 2 intos, fumble recovery and a block kick. So Week 15, a good matchup versus the Rams, 2nd most fantasy points to defenses on the season. I know Baker Mayfield's probably going to start. I know he had the 98-yard drive to win the ball game. And I know everyone thinks Baker Mayfield's back and he'll be one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but obviously that's not going to happen. And they go into cold Lambeau Field in December, Monday Night Football game is a recipe disaster for Mayfield in this offense. I think this Packer defense will tee off. They're freshened up a little coming off the bye, and they're definitely a defense I would start this week. So that's a few defense DST units I would start here for week 15 of the fantasy football season.